Anybody here with relatives who are mental health professionals by any chance? Anybody in your family that you're not ashamed to raise your hand about? Okay, outstanding. Okay, after that says Captain United States Marine Corps. So they say one's a Marine, always a Marine. We got any other Marines here? Oh, Semper Fi, sister, Semper Brother. Hey, oh wow, South Carolina, you got a bunch of. Got any other veterans in the room by any chance? Oh yes, outstanding. Thank you for your service. You got anybody? You got any veterans in their family by any chance? You got anybody like that? Not ashamed to raise your hand. Okay. Thank you for your family service. Now, I left the Marine Corps because I was retired, and I was retired with a medical condition called schizophrenia. So to follow a pattern here, can I ask, do we have any other schizophrenic persons with, or if you prefer politically correct, persons with schizophrenia in the room? One. Thank you. One other person. Outstanding. How about our, good number?
There was three.
Three. Oh, yeah. And this is my third time presenting to the South Carolina NAMI convention. This is coming together here. How about our brothers and sisters with schizoaffective or bipolar illness? We have any of those? Oh, looky here, yes. Let's give them a big hand for being so open about that. I started giving these talks 25 years ago, and I would ask that question. And unless I was talking to a NAMI group, I get no hands up at all on anyone willing to identify themselves with serious mental illness. Now, how about family members of persons with serious mental illness? Anybody like that? Oh, well, a NAMI conference. Okay, anybody didn't raise your hand? What are you doing in the room? Well, good to have you here. All right, now, so I've been living with this condition. Came down with it at age 25. And I've been hospitalized 10 times, 6 different states, not just Ohio, although that's where they declared me insane and took me away for a while. I continue to have breakdowns, but they changed the laws. It's not quite so easy to lock folks up now. And I usually take off a few weeks because it's like bipolar illness. Schizophrenia for a lot of us happens to be a episodic disorder. Now, one of the problems that I have, or have had, living with this condition the last 40 years is, quite frankly, it's the chronically normal folks. They will come up to you if you're in a military identify, and even my driver's license has a disability, a schizophrenia on. They will say something like, well, you don't look disabled to me. What is it? And it's true. In fact, I looked out here in Greenville. I have yet to find the first handicapped parking space demarcated with a little Haldol pill so that you can tell folks what is the nature of this disability. What, I mean, you look normal, you act normal. How do you say you've been hospitalized all this time and you have this condition. What is that? Well, it took me a while to, how do I respond to this? What are your signs and symptoms? And when I teach a lot of CIT classes, and the police always want to know. 10% of our calls are for the mentally ill. We go in, and there are a bunch of people in there. How do we know which one is the mentally ill person? How do we spot you people? And I said, well, there are a number of ways and things you can look for, because policemen, in a lot of ways, are like us paranoid schizophrenics. Very suspicious. So they want to pick up on something they can see to identify. And then I tell them, and I don't notice this myself because I don't see it. But I see myself on TV for various reasons all the time. And so I know you up close have already seen this. My mouth moves involuntarily without me wanting it to. Now, most of the folks here in the audience know this is because of dopamine. The nigrostriatal tract carries dopamine to your striatum is what is the problem in schizophrenia for the most part. In fact, I have two friends, dinner friends, that I've been on program with them frequently. John Nash from the program The Beautiful Mind. Anybody see The Beautiful Mind here? Okay. Well, I had the honor of spending breakfast, lunch, and dinner 3 days in a row with Dr. Nash and his family last year. And Ellen Sachs, Ellen won the MacArthur Genius Award. Her book on having schizophrenia, one of the 10 best-selling books of the year. Do anybody know Ellen? Okay, well, those two, interestingly enough, both of them describe, because they're like me, they're asked, what is it like to be psychotic? Both of them say the same thing in sort of different tones. They say it's like having a dream. Actually, Ellen, she characterized it more of a nightmare of a dream, but it's still a dream. And this metaphor really catches on with me. I'm always trying to communicate to the normals what this is like. Because what happens in a dream? In a dream, you see things. You hear things. You start putting things together and, oh, there's some kind of, in the dream. And what's happening in that dream? We just found this out neurophysiologically in the last 10 years. What's happening in that dream, it's dopamine. Every night when you're sleeping, for about 20 minutes out of every 90, everything goes REM sleep. And in REM sleep, what happens is dopamine gets released from those neurotransmitters in your brain, and you start seeing things, and you start hearing things, you start thinking strange things, which is fine, it's healthy, as long as you're asleep. The problem with us is we go into that dream state, we're not asleep. So, you see what I mean? So, those miracle drugs that came out in the 50s, oh, that one, anybody ever heard of Thorazine? Oh, so good. Yeah. That's what I started on. And what does that do? It blocks the dopamine transmission. So you take it, it slows down that propensity to dream during the day, and it improves. The problem is that nigrostriatal tract of dopamine does another thing. It also controls your ability to have smooth muscular movement. So when you're blocking that, suddenly you begin to, well, we got this thing called Parkinson's disease. Everybody heard of that, right? Well, everybody, you're moving toward that as you're here. You live long enough, you're going to get it. Because in about 80% of those dopamine transmitters in that nigrostriatal tract dry up, you're going to start moving and all these twitching things. But with us, taking those old type medications, it stopped the dreaming, but it also started the twitching. Sometimes it's called extrapyramidal side effects, sometimes it's called tardive dyskinesia, depending on what part of the cranial spinal system it's hitting. But essentially, this is my mark of honor. You want to see my disability? For those of us over 40 or so, look for these. This is called buccal activity by our psychiatry friend. Buccal is Greek for mouth or cheek. And usually these twitching symptoms with the meds hit the face first. And the psychiatrists have a test called the AIMS test, A-I-M-S, Abnormal Involuntary Movement Scale. And on that scale, I get it every year, goes from 0 to 4. I get a 2. If I got 4, then it would mean it's interfering with my ability to move my mouth and cheek to the degree I wouldn't be able to speak. And at a high 4, of course, it can even interfere with your ability to eat, which can be real serious, and then that's tardive dyskinesia. Psychiatrists have been sued, as you know, for as much as successfully, $500,000, etc. So, there we are. You want to spot us, look at our mouth. Who's moving their cheek? But didn't I say over 40? Dr. Fried, why did you say over 40? Well, 39, you don't get this? Well, that goes back in 1989. We all know that another miracle drug came out called clozapine, the gold standard of treatment. Second generation meds, and they don't tend to do this, not to the same degree. And so those guys, the youngers who are mostly on these second generations, don't have these muscular movement side effects. So then I get from the policeman, well, wait a minute, we're trying to find out who's got schizophrenia, and it sounds like you're telling us you can spot something, but it's not from the schizophrenia, it's for the pills you take for the schizophrenia. It's not schizophrenia. Well, I mean, how can you spot them? What if they're not taking pills? Or what if they're taking new pills? I say, oh yeah, okay, well here's what you do. Talk to us. Talk to us, and if you've got one of us that's going into psychotic state, we do a thing that the psychiatrists take the wording right out of their DSM, which I call the Book of Insults. The DSM says in schizophrenia and bipolar, you do a thing called loose association. Well, I consider that a pejorative term. I much prefer something like having an expanded horizon of meaningfulness. That we over-associate, over-connect, far beyond what chronically normal folks can do. But a consequence of this is when you talk to us, you'll find we're not staying on the topic. We're not staying on your topic. We're on our topic just fine. And of course, in the literature, it's a little bit is called circumstantiality. That's when you get off the topic and can come back. And tangentiality, that's when you get off the topic and you don't come back. And then word salad, where even from word to word, there's no connecting. But that tendency of us to over-connect, to over-associate is, I mean, you got lots of telltale signs, but that's an easy one. And so then the response usually is, what else you do? Well, the one that embarrasses my wife the most is those of us with this condition, a lot of us, have a tendency to talk to ourselves. Or maybe hum to ourselves. When I'm out with another couple or two with my wife at a restaurant or something, she will kick me under the table because I can't always tell that I'm doing this and disturbing the rhythms there. But talking to yourself or just mumbling is something that we do. And I bring them back to my Marine Corps training, because in the Marine Corps they taught us how to give a talk. It's got 5 parts. The last part's called the ending. Can't remember the middle 3. The first part's called an attention gainer. So in order to start off this talk, the Marine Corps, with this roof, I could pull out my Glock, pull the trigger, and get your attention. But here, in more civilized setting, I've learned to start with a cartoon. Now, I gave this cartoon a few years ago. Actually, Dr. Vogel-Shabili had invited me in. Yeah. And this is my favorite cartoon for seriously mentally ill folks. And then I found out consumers, not all of them, they love this cartoon. They go, how can I get a copy of that cartoon? So I thought, well, I ought to show this cartoon. Now, forward is left, right? In South Carolina, you do things. Okay. We got a thing up here that says, what's the frequency, Kenneth? Kenneth, tell me the blank frequency. Who are you talking to? Nobody. I'm a schizophrenic. I spend all day blabbering unnecessarily in space. You must be terribly lonely. Not at all. Because recently they got these folks with the cell phone. Same sort of thing. I went to the state hospital for 20-some years, and I got used to it. But now I find out in the airport, I'm going, I love this cartoon so much is because a few years ago I'm coming back from the APA, I'm meeting in New Orleans, and I always realize that when I don't want to be locked up again. That is a major mission of mine. I don't want the guys in the white coats to come after me. So you normal's going to laugh. So I'm always careful about, I don't want to send the signals that frighten the normals, like talking to myself in crowds and this sort of thing. And for some reason, it comes up when I'm facing security type thing. Like when I'm driving along and I see a police officer in that black and white car ahead, I will immediately begin practicing. When he stops, no officer, sir, I was only doing 45, and I'm talking to myself, I'm going to get the tone, I'm going to get it down. Now, I've never been stopped, but if I ever am, I'm ready. But I'm going through security at this airport, and I should have realized that my mumbling was getting a little too loud, because the gal in front of me, she whips around like this and says, "Are you talking about me?" And I go, oh, and then I thought of this cartoon. I said, oh no, ma'am, it's a new cell phone I have built into the suit. I think they call it a Bluetooth. You can see it. Well, the look I got from her, it's not a matter of whether she believes you or not. You want to get her out of that anger, I'm going to attack you mode with some kind of humor. When you have this condition, you have to realize you don't understand how the normals work. You got socially. And you're going to do something from time to time that is going to get them. And you've got to figure, all right, another one of these times has come. How do I get out of it? Now, very important here. As was mentioned in that CID workshop earlier, 1955 we had over 500,000 folks in the state hospital, and now we have 2014 140,000. So with a doubling of population since 1950 in this country, you do the math, over 95% of us who were or would have been in those hospitals are now out in the community. Hallelujah, we have our freedom. Well, thank you, Lord. Now, this graph, remember, it begins coming down in the 60s. You remember the 60s, right? Well, that's when they caught me. Yeah, I was a Marine Corps security officer. I'd just been selected for promotion. And I've seen this movie, The Manchurian Candidate. Everybody see this? It's all about the Chinese communist brainwashing and hypnotizing our troops against control. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is Vietnam War. I'm thinking, wait a minute, we got the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, all these planes, and we are being beaten by a bunch of little guys in black pajamas. Then I figured it out. After I saw the Manchurian Candidate, obviously these Asian communists have some kind of hypnotic There is nothing wrong with me. Absolutely nothing. That is it. I've solved the biggest problem in the whole world. And naturally, they didn't leave me in Jacksonville. They moved me to this place. Anybody know what this place is? Who said that? Bethesda. Yes, sir, the house of mercy. And my mercy was on the 16th floor here. This is the U.S. Navy and now the Army, because they moved Walter Reed here recently, and our higher politicians. If Mr. Obama gets a hangnail, this is where they'll send him to get it fixed. But I was on the 16th floor here. Now, I've given 2,000 talks in the last 25 years. I've never told anybody this before, because there's 6 months, and there's lots of things that have happened. But one of the first things, they stuck me in this big seclusion room, and then everything go round. Any patients, you remember rounds, like all these guys in white coats come along. And the senior psychiatrist looks at me and says, well, why are you here? And I look back at him, and I just seen my chart, and I said, because I have paranoid schizophrenia. And he goes, why would you say that? And I said, because you put it on my chart. He said, why? And then he gets all upset, because you're not supposed to let the patient see their charts. And I break down in tears and realize that this is going to be an adventure. Now, in those days, we had a ruler of the roost who's no longer in that capacity in psychiatry. His name was Sigmund Freud. Maybe some of you older folks have heard of Sigmund. You can go into a psychiatrist's office. You always have a picture, and then many have a bust, right? And he would rub his nose. And Sigmund Freud told older psychiatrists exactly what was wrong with people with any psychiatric condition, and it was, what happened to you as a child? Now, who cares for you as a child? Your parents, and particularly that mother. So what's the therapy? The therapy, 3 days a week, I'm walking down the hall, seeing my psychiatrist, a little chit-chat, and it's always, and now let's talk about your mother. Yeah, this happens several times, and then I'm beginning to think, what about your mama? Now, I can't say this because he got the keys, and they're not telling me if they're ever going to let me out of this place, but I know he has to say so. They kept me in there for 6 months. Nothing wrong with me. No, I had just rationally, analytically figured out why we are not winning this war. I have done my duty to apprise the authorities, and they need to work that bit of information into how they're going to proceed in getting the Cold War to end, obviously. But I did realize one thing, even though there was nothing wrong with me, when I get out of here, I'm going to have to get a job. And in those days, pre-ADA, every application, third or fourth question was, do you now or have you ever been under psychiatric care? And I'm not going to lie. So I'm not going to get a job. I am not going to get a job. Now, this is America. What do we do in America when you can't get a job? You go to school, right? Guys, at our socioeconomic, the answer is go to school. When I'm teaching CID policemen, it's always return to crime. I mean, but to me, it's go to school. And so I decided to go to this, I'd learned some Japanese when I was in the Marine Corps. I decided to go to this international business school. And I had grades, and I had real good GRE scores. But they wanted something else that was a serious barrier to my acceptance, and they wanted letters of recommendation from responsible people. They wanted 3 of them. well, now who in a responsible position is going to write a letter of recommendation for somebody just coming out of the psychiatric ward? That was a problem. But I'm here to tell you I was able to get 3 really excellent letters of recommendation to that school. One was from a commander, one was from a Navy captain, and one was from an admiral. Now, how do you think I was able to do that? Yeah, who do you think were the patients with me up in the psychiatric ward? Yeah. And the commander asked, he's a physician, has a lot of physicians in the psychiatric ward, by the way. He's a tall physician. I said, he's the first one I asked. I said, Commander, excuse me, you don't know me that well, but I really need your help. Could you write a letter of recommendation for me? And he looks down at me, scowl, no! And I said, okay. He takes a step away and he turns back and he says, I said no! But if you write it, I'll sign it for you. And that's how I know I got 3 of the greatest letters ever written. Now, you're all kind enough to laugh at that comedic story there, but in all humor, there's a little truth, and in all psychosis, there's even more truth. What's the truth there? The truth is, NAMI, consumer movement, advocacy activities in the last 40, 50 years have changed this world for the mentally ill, or begun to. But we didn't change that by getting down on our knees and begging, oh, Mr. Psychiatrist, please take care of me. Oh, I got this awful disease. No. And change is, same thing happened to me in Bethesda. Turn to those who are like you, in the same circumstances. They don't tell anybody. Taboo topic, nobody talks about it. And when NAMI came along in 1979, those families brave enough to stand up and actually say, not only do we have insanity in the family, but we want something done about it. That has been able to change things and continues to change things. And as we go forward, I hope to stress some of that. Now, I got out after 5 months, went to graduate school. Nothing wrong with me. Nothing wrong with me. Got out of graduate school, got all these jobs, went to one of the 8 companies that offered me a job, didn't have a healthcare questionnaire, and so there was no, have you ever had psychiatric? And I took that job. Had the job for about 3 months, went off to headquarters in Milwaukee, and then I began to break the code of the universe. Anybody ever broken that code? Yeah, I was working on merging the wisdom of the Far East, the Orient, with the efficiency and science of the Occident and the West. I realized that Mitsubishi, 3 diamonds. Mitsui, 3 wells. Mitsukoshi, big department store at Epcot, 3 crosses. Sanwa, Sansui, Sanyo, 3, all 3. Because the Japanese are suspicious, they won't say 4. 4 is the same, sheep means death, they won't say it. So if they're going to have a tea ceremony, it'll either be 3 or be 5 cups of tea. I know this in interacting with the Japanese, so I say, the deal's going to run $4 million. I say, oh, that'll run you $3 to $5 million. They began to pick up on my giving deference to the way they looked at things with their superstition. And then I was having dinner with the vice president. I'm getting real heady here. Then I decided, oh, that's the Orient. Now, how about the Occident? What can I focus on that will ring the bells of the Westerner? And I'm looking out my hotel room, and I'm seeing the skyline with all these steeples. And the steeples on the churches. And there's the Holy Trinity Church, and there's the Trinity Church of the Lutheran. And I'm going, wait a minute. All our Judeo-Christian heritage is on that Trinity 3 stuff, like the Mitsui and the Sanwa Sanyo. Hey, I got a connection here. I'm connecting. And wait a minute. Isn't our entire government organized on the judicial, the legislative, and the executive branches? Slice it the other way, isn't it the federal, state, and local? And that flag I'm fighting for, is that not 3 colors? The red, the white, and the blue? And I look down at the traffic, and the traffic's moving, controlled by those 3 lights. Green, the color of money. Everything moves, everything goes. Red, the color of blood. Everything stops. You know that gold and amber, everything speeds up. Without even thinking about it, that concept of 3ness totally pervasive into Sunday morning. So I go down to the largest Trinity temple in all of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I go in. I go down Wisconsin Avenue. When I get up to 12th Street, if I go right three blocks away is Mount Sinai Hospital, a great psychiatric ward. If I had taken a right turn, hey, I'd probably be still working for that company. I go into church, and I sat in the back of the church, and the ceremony was already going on. And as I'm walking up there, this is the way it works. I'm being controlled by those lights, sort of. Lights red, I'll stop. I'm walking. Even if I'm in the middle of the block, I will stop. Doesn't make sense, but if you're really getting into the newfound wisdom of breaking the code, it makes sense. So I'm going in, and I sit in the back, and ceremony's going on there. A priest thing. And then I didn't have to go. I just got out, and I walked right in the middle of the aisle, right aiming at that priest with that golden cross right there behind him, and kneel down right next to him, thinking he might need some help here. Now, for those of you who don't go to church very often, this is not normally encouraged during the ceremony. But I'm thinking, here's the mind going. I've been to a psychiatric hospital. Nothing wrong with me, but I have been there. And I also have a degree in psychology. So I know how you determine if somebody is sane. And I don't want to go insane again. So how am I determining that? Well, you ask 3 questions. Person, place, and time. Person, who are you? And I'm thinking, easy. My name is Frederick Joseph Frese the Third. Place, where am I? I know where I am. I'm in the largest, greatest temple to the Holy Trinity in all of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And now time. What time is it, little boy? No, we're not talking about nanoseconds here. We're not talking about what hour, we're not talking about what day of month. No, we're cosmological. In the cosmos, what time is it? Well, everybody knows. Charles Darwin told us we're in evolution. We're going forward in evolutionary time. Really? So you with evil evolution? No, I am not with evil. I'm not with Wisconsin. Evil? No, I'm not going there. Well, in my mind, if you're not going with evolution, then you're going the other way. You don't evolve, you devolve. And you're not going with evolution, you're going with devolution. What's going to be? You're going with the devil, you're going with the evil. I don't know, Lord. I'm just here with the priest is kicking. I'm going to get the priest. But I know I'm in the right place, because I'm breaking code. And then I turned into like a werewolf animal. Congregation. probably scared some of them. And then it was like I didn't realize the time, but later it was like I began to devolve. I became a werewolf, and then some kind of a dragon. I could feel the flames coming out of my nostrils. And I'll go on a little rug like this, like a snake writhing around this golden cross out there, writhing. And then I became like a fish out of water. Flop, 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 flop. And then I kept going back. I became like a one-celled animal, like an amoeba. And I could feel myself oozing into the rug. And I kept going back. And I became not animate anymore. I was a molecule. And then I went from being a molecule to an atom. What kind of atom? Well, the simplest form of atom. One, but where's the three? Well, it's an isotope of three. Hydrogen isotope of 3 tritium. I know that because I guarded those bombs. I've turned into the tritium atom, the one that is split, Greek for skits, in the middle of that thermonuclear bomb, and I have become the instrument of the Lord. I'm going to be picked up in a huge bomber airplane and taken over Moscow. We are going to end this world and this universe. I am that instrument. I could hear the motors on the plane going. Later I realized it was an ambulance. And I woke up. These are some of the folks in the psychiatric board. But this is the Milwaukee church I was in, and here's what the seminary was. 6,000 patients there in Milwaukee County at one time. They put me in there, and I woke up thinking, oh, well, the world's over. But when the world's over, you either go to heaven or hell. And I was so glad there were no flames around. I was strapped down. It wasn't hell, I figured. But it's so filthy, it can't be heaven. So I figure I'm in limbo or purgatory or somewhere between heaven and hell. And then when they finally let me out, I knew what my mission in purgatory was to get to heaven, and that was to clean up this filthy place. And so I got out a rag and I started cleaning, and then the staff took it away from me. And then I looked, and they weren't watching. I started licking. It wasn't too bad till I got into the bathroom. I got the sink, then I go to the toilet. Now somewhere when I got to the toilet, a little thing in here is no good. When I was working at the state hospital, we did have patients, more than one. They smiled at feces between births. So I wasn't that bad. And they let me out in the street. And these were the And a year and a half I went without job, without work. And they picked me up in Columbus, Ohio, put me this way. By the way, this is the largest psychiatric hospital in the entire country. When Dorothea Dixon put it in one building. In fact, not only was this the largest psychiatric hospital in the entire country, this is the largest building of any kind in the entire country until they built the Pentagon in 1943, Columbus State Hospital. That's why it was such an honor to have been a guest here. Right after they killed Martin Luther King on April 4th and Bobby Kennedy on June 6th, 4-4-6-6-7-7, they got me. They didn't kill me, they put me away. And this was a new order of activity, because before I was just ordered in the psychiatric hospital. They picked me up in a church and put me in. Not this time. This time they bring me to court. And in the court they asked me the question right out of the movie The Beautiful Mind. And they got to it by saying, have you ever been in a psychiatric hospital before? Oh yeah, I was in a number of them. And they said, well, you ever been in one of them for very long? I said, oh yeah, I was in Bethesda for 5 or 6 months. And when I said this, the psychiatrist smiled, thinking, go ahead, smile. And so did the soldiers, they all smiled. The magistrate, not smiling, he's there. And I'm looking at them, and you're wondering why we're smiling. I said, yeah, matter of fact, I am. And they said, well, see, you might have been not told this before, but Son, you have a condition called schizophrenia disorder. You may look like you're getting better from time to time, but you're not. Your brain is just going to degenerate from and in all likelihood, you're going to spend the rest of your life under the care of the state mental hospital. And at that, the magistrate bangs his hammer down and says, I hereby declare you to be an insane person under the laws of the state and remand you indefinitely to the state hospital system. That was not a real good day for me. I had other plans, and fortunately for me, they discovered I was a veteran, and they can ship a veteran down to the hour-away Veterans Hospital. And when I got there, it was under the veterans that I had my turnaround. Everybody asked, where did you have your turnaround? It was veterans. I had that happen. It was sort of a combination of the veterans and the state hospital. When I'm in that state hospital, no clothes on, they don't let me out. I unfortunately told them I studied karate in Japan, so they weren't letting me out, so I'm urinating and defecating, and then my mindset is there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with me. And then I realized that I've just been put away as insane. I'm in the seclusion room, walling around in my own feces. There might not be anything wrong with me, but there's something wrong somewhere. There's definitely something wrong. And it went from realizing there's something wrong somewhere to say, well, maybe it is me. And if it is me, how am I going to... I'm going from there's nothing wrong with me to what's wrong with me? What is wrong with a person with schizophrenia? How do you do it? So they put me in Chillicothe. My turnaround. The guy in the white coat comes up, he's a psychologist, gives me all these psychological tests to take. And I take them. 3 days later, he comes back. Sad look on his face. I said, what's the matter, Doc? Didn't I do very well on your test? He says, oh yeah, Fred, as a matter of fact, that's the problem. You did very well on these tests. In fact, if it weren't for your schizophrenia, you might even have become a professional. Now, when he said that to me, he was like, well, you can't be one of us. But I'm the type of guy who likes a challenge. Did I mention the fact that I married a Roman Catholic nun 37 years ago? We got 4 kids. Much like that challenge, because that definitely came to me as a challenge. And I was saying, well, so I got out of there and was able to get a job in the back wards of a security psychiatric facility. Worked there 3 years, went off to grad school, had a few breakdowns. I think I was the first person in the country we know of who ever had schizophrenia and was able to get a doctorate in psychology. I did that because the senior faculty members spread the word that the reason I wasn't there was because I had a alcohol problem of my cover. But I got out. I owed the state of Ohio some time. Started working as a psychologist, then 12 years to the month after I was put away as insane officially, I was promoted to be the director of psychology at the state's largest psychiatric hospital. Thank you. This is amazing because I give a lot of talks, and whenever I give talks to consumers or to family members, they all clap and thank you. But if I'm talking to psychiatrists or judges, no, they just sort of, how did he get out? Yeah. All right. So spent 10 years or so there, and then NAMI and Pam Hyde came along. NAMI came along in '79. They started encouraging folks with these disorders to become open about it. So I became open, and whoa, suddenly I got movie contracts. I'm giving them, NAMI put me on their board and all kinds of stuff. It's been 25 years of people throwing rose petals at me. But I wanted to say something here. When NAMI first kind of adopted me, they had a group of 3 psychiatrists, 3 psychologists, 3 social workers, and 3 nurses, and they all met. They were called the Curriculum Committee. And they met for 3 days, twice a year or so in Washington, and they invited me to come. And so I'm in Washington, and in 3 days, the leader of them, who was president of NAMI, Agnes Hatfield, said, "Fred, we've been watching you and talking about you." I said, "Well, that's interesting." And she said, "I got a question for you." I said, "What's that?" She said, "All of us have children with schizophrenia, and they're all in the backwards of hospitals. So you got the same condition. How did you go with having this same condition our kids get? So you get to be director of psychology at the state, and they are all suffering from this disorder." And I was so hit by that question. And I remember I answered, "Agnes, that's a wonderful question, and my answer is I don't know. I don't know, but what I will do is I will write an article." It turned out to be 12 coping skills for persons with schizophrenia as to how a person with schizophrenia lives with this condition and is able to function in the world of the chronically normal. So I turned that out. It's on my website today. It was 20 years ago. At one time, you Google schizophrenia and coping, it was the top thing in the country, to advise folks on how to do that. Now, living with this condition is interesting because remember Sigmund Freud, all the psychiatrists in the country had it wrong until NAMI came along, because there's a huge fight in organized psychiatry. All of the psychiatry departments in the entire country had a Freudian in charge, and 5 years later, all of them were gone. NAMI came in, formed allegiances. NAMI ladies were very well connected with the biological psychiatrists, and that has changed the world, so that when Gala and I were on the national board, we put up billboards saying, "Mental illness is a brain disease." I mean, we're the ones that, it's NAMI is the one that did that. But notice, we didn't say where in the brain it was. But you got 100 billion cells in here, each one with 10,000 connected. That's a lot of connected. Wait. So my thing is, what's wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. I mean, you lock me up, you label me, I take these meds, there's something wrong. What is it? Where in this brain is it? Well, it's in the brain. Well, that's nice. Where in the brain? What's happening? So I've spent, I'm on the board of advisors of scientific schizophrenia bulletin and all of that. In fact, this article that I wrote on this, for the last 6 months, much to my shock, has become the most read article in the history of schizophrenia bulletin ever. I mean, it's unbelievable. Now, I think it's because Ellen Sachs is my co-author, but to communicate to psychiatry that you can recover, but we don't know yet, although we're learning, where and how this thing works. Now, Kraepelin created dementia praecox. He threw catatonia, hebephrenia, and paranoia together and came up with what we call schizophrenia. Everybody knows about catatonia, right? Yeah, I'd go into this, but for a while. My friend Dan Fisher was 3 months in this, MD, PhD. Catatonia is this. Anybody know hebephrenia? When I first heard this, I thought it was something the Hebrews had. But Heb is Greek for youth, and it means big symptom is laughing. And that's why they called them the funny farms, not the happy homes, because you'd go out there, even when I started in State Hospital, you hear all laughter all over the place. But Kraepelin combined those with paranoid schizophrenia because what's coming finally to this country with Obamacare, Bismarck had put in Germany, and the bureaucrats were taking over the healthcare system. He wanted to make it as simple as possible. All these guys have a condition from which they're not going to recover in his mind. He called it dementia praecox, which they quickly changed that to schizophrenia. Notice, permanent, pervasive, you're not going to recover if you have it. is what these psychiatrists, up until some of them still, certainly until the late 80s and 90s, that was the case. Uh-oh. Oh, Lord. All right, schizophrenia, we all know this. Traditionally think the delusions and the hallucinations, but this disorganized thing, and particularly the cognitive deficits. Cognitive deficits, we discovered this about 15 years ago, because all of the pills approved by the FDA for schizophrenia are because they tested against a placebo or water. If the group getting the new pill has lessens delusions and hallucinations more than water, they'll approve it. But they weren't looking at cognitive deficits at all. And it turns out the reason our people, if you've been reading the New York Times, we've got a series of 5 of us in the headlines on Sunday here in the last couple of years. Even though you're delusional, even though you're hallucinating, you can still work. Some of us have worked pretty well. But if you've got cognitive deficit come with schizophrenia, you can't work. If you have very serious problems with your working memory or your attention or your social interaction skills. So we started a matrix program with NIMH maybe 10 years ago. We now have pills in clinical trials ready for those cognitive deficit skills. We also have programs called psychiatric rehabilitation or enhancement program. Okay, it's all in the brain. Everybody agrees that. What's that big red thing there? That's got a lot of names. Caudate nucleus. Everybody hold their fingers up like that. It's about the size of a caudate nucleus. You got 2 of them right between your earlobes and behind your eyeball. Turns out, I think it was medical school 15 years when I started thinking, we knew that when you're born with so many nerve cells in the brain, you don't add any during your lifetime. Wrong. You learned the last 10 years, oh yeah. There is 1 or 2 places where every day, in fact every hour, as you were sitting here, you are adding nerve cells in your brain. One of them is this dentate nucleus, so they forget about the memory stuff. The other one is this part right here. Now it turns out that coincidence with new nerve cells being built here. Research in 2011, was that 3 years ago, came out of London, which said something exceedingly interesting. And how's it all study? I made an analysis on dopamine synthesis. Dopamine in this that purple point, the caudate nucleus here. In that, if you look at children who have ultra high risk for schizophrenia, you will find, as they did, that in them they have about 10 to 15% extra dopamine activity in this part of the brain compared to normal kids. And the more that they have, the more likely that ultra high risk for schizophrenia is actually going to go into schizophrenia. That's why in DSM-5, the book of insult, came out. They wanted to include a new category, a new diagnosis, and that is at risk for schizophrenia. Big fight. NAMI took positions both ways because we, for the first time, had biological evidence of kids you can identify who are at very high risk for schizophrenia. And once you go into schizophrenia, for the first part of it, you've got lots, 15% and more extra dopamine presynaptic activity. Well, turns out, just in the last 3 months, we got to study. This is really ring. Now, what's my mission here? I need to talk to you. I want to know what's wrong with me. I've been working on this for 40 years. Study comes out of Brady Mind Institute in Australia, focusing on this same part of the brain. It's called a nucleus there, and it says something really rang with me.
that in people with schizophrenia, their caudate nucleus in the dorsal part is malfunctioning with regard to dopamine transmission. And the findings are from psychological tests, people with schizophrenia do well. They are rational until it comes to goal-directed behavior. The authors in Australia say it's like a car that can run, but it's in neutral, and people in schizophrenia can't put it into drive. Now, in my own way of thinking, I'm from Akron, Ohio, I've been characterizing this for years as saying, well, we're just like anybody else until the time comes where the rubber meets the road. We bail. We can't. Something about people with schizophrenia have in the same area of striatum, but caudate nucleus is part of it. Malfunction, presynaptic dopamine activity in that area. That now start out saying, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with me is I can't do anything. I can give a speech, but that's not doing it. I can't write. I haven't got a book. I can't. And most of us who talk to schizophrenia, now, unlike our bipolar friends, our bipolar friends are also subject to psychosis, but they don't have, like this area of the striatum with that problem. In fact, we make wonderful partners because we schizophrenics can do all the scheming, and the manic depressives can get all the work done. So here we are. You all know about these. You see this on video. Blocking of the receptors there, etc. Oh yeah. Also, genetic. My friend Irv Gottman, he turned out the most quoted graph in all schizophrenia research here back in the 90s. How likely you are to inherit. 1% of the population has it, but depending on who you're related to, it goes up. If you've got it, your children have 13% chance of getting it, unless you marry somebody with schizophrenia, that's almost a 50% chance. Terminal twins, 70% chance of one has it. If there's identical twins, almost 50% chance. You inherit the vulnerability. Why they're saying it's 80% heritable in the psychiatric literature is interesting to me, because I think it's the vulnerability there that's more research than this crap. Now, genes. 20 years ago, we taught it in medical school. Each one of you people in this room have just about exactly 100,000 genes in you. Now we know it's closer to 23,000. Now 23,000 is a lot easier to count and track than it is 100,000. And 23,000, well, now that we've broken the genome, we mapped the human genome, 23,000 genes. If this is genetic, if this is vulnerable, if it goes in family, let's identify which exact genes give you the vulnerability to these disorders. That makes sense? So, starting in 03, billions of our research dollars are involved in that. Huge news just last month. 118 have been identified. That's huge. GWAS, worldwide studies. 108 genes contribute to the vulnerability here. Well, take a pill for that. Here are three of them. Probably the most interesting is the dopamine, of course, is a catapulting. And there's the norepinephrine and adrenaline. The comp gene, you all familiar with this? Catapulting translation gene study. This is a study proposed in biological psychiatry in 05. What they did in Australia, they took a bunch of schizophrenic, no, they took a bunch of adolescents, age 15 to 18. And what they did was, they looked at this comp gene, and in the comp gene of all your kids, there's two types of comp genes. You got amino acids, about a quarter of them have 10 minutes ago, sorry.
Apologize. We got the homeless, we got the jails. Here's a problem. Back when Dorothea Dix was around, 20% of the folks were seriously mentally ill in jails and prisons. When she built the hospitals, we came down to about less than 2%. But as you can see, time goes on back. 2014, this is from the National Sheriff's Association, we're actually back to 20% of those in the jails and prisons. Why? Because Lazar decision in Wisconsin in the early 70s was the one that said must be imminently dangerous to self or others. So those police who picked me up and put me in the Columbus State Hospital in '68, they could do that. 5 years later, same policeman asked their chief, hey, we find psychotic people in the street, what do we do with them? Answer, put them in jail. So that legal decision in the 70s, all the rest of the states followed almost immediately from the Lazar decision. We moved from being able to take care of somebody with serious mental illness to being unable to unless you can prove they are imminently dangerous to self or others. And that's how we had 95% of us out of the hospitals, but a 20-fold increase in those of us in the jails and prisons, which is a real tragedy here. Our crisis intervention teams, our mental health courts, sequential intercepts where we're bringing the same principle to the rest of the criminal justice system, to correctional officers, to parole, probation, and community corrections folks. I just addressed 700 probation officers in Cook County a couple of years ago. The same principle is if you're in the criminal justice system, you need to know about mental illness because you're going to have a different approach to how you handle folks with our disorders. And then we've got our Treatment Advocacy Center. You all know, I hope, Kendra Webdale, unfortunately, was killed. Schizophrenic guy Arnold Goldstein pushed her in front of an onrushing subway car in New York. As a result, New York was the first state to change that. You no longer had to be imminently dangerous. If you'd shown signs of dangerousness in the last 3 or 4 years, we can now get treatment to you, at least on an outpatient basis. That's called AOT, Assisted Outpatient Treatment, and it is sweeping the nation. We've got the laws changed in 27 states, 4 huge counties, including Los Angeles and San Francisco, just in the last 2 months. While we passed our law unanimously in both houses last month. I don't know where you are in South Carolina on this. The Murphy bill also addresses this very well, by the way. Okay, and it's, Merle, this is such a great talk, and I haven't even finished the introduction yet. These are the folks who were in the psychiatric hospitals with me. We began forming groups calling ourselves the Psychiatric Inmates Liberation Movement. Here we are taking over the governor's office, putting out the Madness Network news. But we didn't get a lot of political traction, and we realized it was because we didn't have a T-shirt. So we got a T-shirt called Shrink Resistant here. We don't need those shrinks. And our movement began. We got the ADA to come along shortly thereafter. NAMI was founded 79. Look at those. The schizophrenic mothers became the NAMI mommies. Look at those beady eyes on these ladies. 3 schizophrenic mothers and 1 dysfunctional dad sitting right behind them. They founded this fantastic organization because one reason it turned out a lot of them were family members of U.S. senators. Senator Domenici here, his wife was on our national NAMI board early on, Nancy Domenici, for 3 years, and we were able to do things tremendously and very much change the world as it would not have changed without NAMI. Somebody mentioned Suzanne Vogel-Shabilia, the psychiatrist with 5 kids, president of National NAMI. She's co-authored several papers with me. She came to your consumer conference. The greatest thing about Suzanne, however, is her name, Vogel being German for bird, and Shabilia being Italian, Sicilian for brain. It's she's been a real advocate, very open about her dozen plus psychiatric hospitalizations. And John Nash is the other one I mentioned. You know about John with his Nobel Prize. When there are ladies in the audience, I always know they'd much rather look at a picture of Russell Crowe. But ladies, that's all we have time for, I'm sorry. That's a book I wrote early on. Suzanne and I produced this. It's become one of the most cited articles, by the way, in psychiatric journals. And I won't go into details, but essentially says we integrated the recovery model with evidence-based practices, saying, look, if you really, really are disabled with these disorders, or you're eating, feces off the floor, we need to take care of you, like you're on the top of old Mount Psychosis here. As you begin to improve, that's when the recovery model with the independence and the autonomy and the hope and all kick in. But to abandon the folks at the top of the Mount Psychosis situation just because, well, if you do, it's a little bit like this cartoon. The lifeguard, we are encouraging people to become involved in their own rescue. Do I need to say more? Dan Fisher, a friend of mine, MD, Ph.D. He was actually in that same psychiatric board I was in Bethesda, but he's board certified, Harvard trained psychiatrist with paranoid schizophrenia. We did recovery. This is the article we've written that for the last 6 months, a new algorithm on this thing. It gives you not only the most cited articles, but the most read articles. And this has been the number 1, 2, or this last issue is number 3 in the history of the journal read. So I'm going, holy cow. Interesting. Carol North, who was schizophrenic, delusional for 10 years. Now she's a full professor of psychiatry at Southwestern, just been elected president of the American Psychopathological Association, very prestigious thing. We pointed out in our article, we're working on stigma. We're trying to bring people out who do well. This is Beth Baxter. She's the only psychiatrist I know of who's on clothespin. Pat Deegan, you probably know about. She's practically created a recovery movement, even though she spent 10 years in and out of psychiatric hospital. This is Ellen Sachs, who is my co-author on that article. She's professor at associate dean at the USC Medical School with schizophrenia. That's her book, one of the best books, Oliver Sacks, there's the best book ever written on somebody recovering. Anybody seen this movie? We made 1.6 million. Minds on the Edge. We got Supreme Court Justice Breyer. We got the last Nobel laureate in psychiatry, Eric Kandel. We got a bunch of judges and Pulitzer Prize nominating some turkey from Ohio over there, all discussing these issues. A lot of people tell me this is the best, even though I'm in it, this is the best thing ever done on schizophrenia. It's on my website if you haven't seen it. And I'm way over time, so I'm apologizing. I'll just run through. This is important. People with schizophrenia, I mentioned we can't do things. We're kind of like our motor's running, but we can't. We actually, scientifically, we have been measured. We can do some things better than normals can do. One of them is syllogisms. If you look at a syllogism saying all buildings speak loudly, a hospital does not speak loudly, therefore a hospital is not a building, that's ridiculous, but it is a legitimate syllogism. Likewise, people with schizophrenia do much better at determining if something's a syllogism if it doesn't make common sense. We're much better than normal to that. And the results of this study were, are people with schizophrenia more logical than healthy volunteers? And so they ran this study, and the answer was, yes, we are. So what's our problem? Our problem is what we pick up in hyper-rationality, we lose in common sense. We can't pick up on things that everybody knows, except the skits, if you doesn't pick up on it. Uh, mm, uh, I'm confused as to which button pushes what. I'm going backwards. It's what happens. When the rubber meets the road, we fall apart. I'm falling apart here. Here's the psychiatrist. Anyway, there are 10 identified psychologists and psychiatrists with schizophrenia. That was 5 years ago. I got such a tremendous reaction to it. I produced another article in press now. I call it 33 and Me. It's 33 psychologists and psychiatrists with schizophrenia and other things. They're getting a lot of attention. But this is what we need. What we need is honesty, openness, transparency from mental health professionals for them to be willing to come out and identify themselves, because until they do, the stigma will continue. I am sorry, but I don't know where I am in this world. I'm going in the wrong direction. I'll get to I have an ending. Oh, look at this. Look at the circles in the middle. Which circle is bigger? Most people say the one on the right. Mm-hmm. Look at those in the middle. Most people say, oh, the one on the left. In fact, in both of those, the Ebbinghaus illusion test, the one on the right is bigger in both of them. Normals get fooled by this much more than schizophrenics do. Why? Because we are not influenced by the context to the degree that normals are. And so, once again, there are very specific, I've got a paper with at least a half dozen of these studies showing there are certain perceptual and cognitive tasks which we can actually do better than our chronically normal friends and relatives. Dear. Lord. Wait a minute. Left is forward, right? Okay. This is hyper-intuitive. You don't need that. We got big news. The Supreme Court has just determined that we got ADA violating questions on the bar exam, the medical exam, and others. Department of Justice on Friday had an agreement with the Supreme Court of Louisiana. They've got to change those questions asking whether or not you have mental illness or bipolar illness as a condition for becoming that. So that we're celebrating all over the place. This is my family. It's a genetic thing. All 4 of my kids have had to take pills. One's been in the hospital fairly recently, actually. We actually had, my kids were interviewed by 60 Minutes in our living room for 2 hours. It's amazing what your kids will tell 60 Minutes. They don't tell their own parents. So when this coverage came out, we figured a wonderful thing for us, because we figured, 2 million copies of the Wall Street Journal coming out. We didn't have to send out nearly as many Christmas cards. So, word from me and my family to you and yours. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm sorry that I was thank you. Thank you. Well,
thank you, Dr. Frese. We certainly appreciate it. I know that nobody here cared that you went over, that's for sure. It was as wonderful as always.